Hello and welcome to an unusual video from me. It's the month of horror, and that means it's time for a horror-themed video. It so happens that I peruse unfiction content from time to time. Unfiction, for those who don't know, can be described as a genre of online content that presents itself as though it depicts actual events, even though the story is fictional. Take today's subject, for example. Valle Verde, or Green Valley, is a story in which the author, Alluvium, discovers a VHS tape containing footage of a malfunctioning, potentially haunted, cancelled video game. Actually, the fact that it's a VHS tape might put it under the category of found footage or analog horror, but the terminology got really confusing to me after a while, so whatever. Now, the real-life reason you've never heard of this game is because it doesn't actually exist, it's fictional, but in the context of the story, something clearly went very, very wrong with the game. And while a haunted video game is not exactly the newest concept in the world, Alluvium has put an unprecedented amount of effort into the presentation. The animation and artwork are of such quality that this looks like a AAA creation. In fact, the quality might be too high, considering this is supposed to be a PlayStation 1 game. This is combined with many interesting mysteries concerning the game itself, its peripheral device, and a rogue AI. This video will cover the initial Valle Verde videos. I am not the first to do this, and I should mention that this video contains only my views and my perspective on what we're seeing. For a different perspective, I recommend the videos by Nightmind, who introduced me to the story, and Nightmare Masterclass, who definitely has a unique take on the story. Before you view any of these though, including mine, I definitely recommend getting the full experience of watching the videos on Alluvium's channel yourself. It won't take more than an hour and it's totally worth it. One thing more before we begin. I have a bit of a disclaimer, and I normally wouldn't say something like this, but hear me out. This is a horror story, so naturally there will be disturbing imagery, but a constant theme in Valle Verde is, oddly enough, Catholic symbolism. Now, we are not sure why the symbolism is there in-universe, but I wanted to point out that some commenters see this symbolism and, based only on this symbolism, instantly draw a conclusion regarding the intentions of the author. I feel this is very reductive, especially considering how much must have gone into the production of this work. It's a lot deeper than some make it seem. I hope everyone can keep an open mind here. Enough of my soapbox, let's begin. The introductory video doesn't have much besides the premise. Alluvium explains that he found a lunchbox containing a VHS tape buried in the forest, with a red string and a statuette marking its location. We don't know why it was buried like that. Anyone who wanted to hide its contents could have just destroyed it, so there may be a reason for allowing the potential for its discovery. I'm only talking about this video for one thing in particular: epic shovel twirl! The next video is part 1 of the VHS tape digitized for our viewing pleasure. After the classic PS1 boot intro, we get some info on what the tape is. The subject, when translated from Japanese, reads Valle Verde, and it's under investigation by two individuals, Pablo Gutierrez and Robert Saturn? Nice name! The report concerns malfunctioning AI, corrupted learning data, and issues regarding specialized hardware. The date this was recorded is February 14th in 1997, and the numbers 05/05 are visible. This may mean something. So, this game uses specialized hardware, a peripheral device perhaps, and it also uses AI with a learning algorithm. 1997 seems rather early for this sort of tech, but I suppose when a company has big dreams, they'll try anything. AI and learning data, these are ideas we'll want to keep in mind as we go forward. Next, we get the logo for Onyxware, who developed the game. The logo is blue and red, which may correlate to the string used to tie the lunchbox the tape was found in. The text beneath the logo reads, "Your heart is in our hands." Isn't that dread-inducing? Next, we get the logo of the Shizuoka Institute of Science and Technology, which is a real institute. It's unknown how it relates to Valle Verde, other than it may be where the developers were formerly employed. Language select is next. Options are UK English, Italian, German, and Spanish, the latter being chosen by the investigator. This is clearly the European version of the game, though what's suspicious is that French is missing from language select. Normally French would be included in any European release. This may be significant, we'll have to wait and see. The opening cutscene is skipped and we get the title screen. You might notice that the logo seems to use a font similar to the Legend of Zelda title screens, particularly the pattern on the two V's. The investigator starts a new game. We see the game connect to the aforementioned external device, the TH Brain. Next we get a cutscene, and I have to reiterate, this level of presentation is astounding. It's so beautifully animated that you could totally imagine this being real. That aside, the player is asked by an NPC named Roddy to input their name. Several interesting notes here. The keyboard appears and it says at the bottom to use the keyboard in the TH brain to write a name. We're not sure what the device looks like, but it has a keyboard, so perhaps the device houses a neural network of sorts, allowing you to type anything into it and have the AI interpret it. Some speculate that the TH brain is a neural input device like a helmet, but that doesn't seem to be the case for now. Also of note, the keyboard is missing the number 8. Strange, but it may come up later. The player inputs test05 as the name. This could suggest a couple ideas. We saw 05/05 on that info screen at the start, right? That could mean this tape is the 5th out of 5. In any case, the name is input, and we get a profile to fill out. The player doesn't put in anything besides a gender, likely speeding through the process. Gotta love this avatar though. Like, that's straight up Ness from Earthbound in different colors. I even made a Smash Bros. Ness skin based on it. Next, the investigator chooses a destination. The icons seen depict a mountain, a forest, an anchor, and an island. However, a new option suddenly appears, likely due to a special button command. Debug Shima, or Debug Island. Must be a test zone of some kind. The player selects it, and we make landfall. After noting the Digimon World forest noises in the background, the player speaks to Foxo, the mayor of the town. Foxo hands the player an ID card and makes note of his armband of leadership. Apparently there's one for every tree of knowledge. Now that's a red flag, but we'll get to that later. Much like Animal Crossing, the player has no home despite moving here, and so Foxo gifts them a complete dump whose owner has vanished. Next we get introduced to a few locals, and here's where the freaky stuff starts. We get introduced to 5 children from all around the world, and each one of them is accompanied by static and weird noises with a glitched portrait of what appears to be a real child. Oh, and apologies in advance if I butcher any of the pronunciation of these names. English is my first and basically my only language, I'm sorry. Anyways, first is John Sug from Georgia. I definitely got that one wrong. Anyways, the tape was recorded in 1997, so the flag shown here is the flag that was used for Georgia in those days. Very nice detail. Take note that there's a drop shadow near the stairs. This is an artificial shadow added to models back in the PS1 era since they didn't have great lighting technology yet. Something or someone is supposed to be here, yet we can't see them. Next is Kazuya from Japan. Here we can see a pair of shoes in front of the stairs, so that's something we can at least see, but it should be noted that a pair of shoes just sitting in front of the house like that is not a good sign in Japanese media. It usually implies the person did something bad to themselves. Next, Oliver from Ireland, who again has a drop shadow, but we can't see anyone where it is. After that is Chloe from France, whose yard is a mess. By this point it's clear something very bad is going on. Personally, I've interpreted the messy yard to mean Chloe is the latest victim of whatever it is, because the debris hasn't been removed yet. Finally, we see Matthias from Argentina, and we actually have an avatar to look at. He doesn't look happy at all and even tries to make a break for it, but he can't move at all and vanishes. It's worth noting that the flag here is flying while all the other flags are down, implying a defeat or submission of some kind. By this point, you've probably caught on to what the game is implying. These kids we're seeing are previous players of the game, and they appear as if they are trapped inside. The nature of this is not yet known, but it sure looks like only Matthias is in any kind of condition to be of assistance in figuring this out. Something interesting happens next. Amidst a jittering image, Foxo shows us his 99-karat gold statue, and the text box turns red with a little gear icon. Then something very interesting happens. If you've got a keen eye, you might notice that the text spells out COM, typically short for computer, and then it changes to El Sonriente, meaning smiling one or smiley. This figure apparently gave Foxo authority over the island, and we should remember that in the next elections. It's possible that this smiling one is the AI, since it was initially called COM at first. The text box switches back to blue as Foxo introduces more NPCs. It's generally believed that anything with a red text box is not something originally part of the game's script and was added by the AI, and we'll see more indicating this later. Anyway, the other islanders include an explorer named Ito, possibly in reference to Itoi of Earthbound fame, and a roboticist named Dr. Nito, who stays in his underground lab all day building boxer robots. You know, like a NEAT. We'll have to talk to his robot Isaac in order to interact with him. Foxo then hands the player 100 coins. Instantly afterwards, however, a cutscene suddenly causes the player's wallet to drop to negative 99,999 coins, which is totally hilarious because Foxo just did something many Animal Crossing players imagine Tom Nook doing to the player in every game. You just can't trust these guys. The tape then cuts to the first anomaly, spontaneous level generation, meaning the AI generated something they weren't expecting, and certainly I wouldn't expect a room full of birthday cake to be here. The general consensus is that these next few zones represent the 7 deadly sins, a common theme in media even though the Bible doesn't really talk about sin that way. A room full of cake represents gluttony, we next have a room full of eyeballs staring like they're envious, and a room full of gold, works of art, and Pink Floyd samples represents greed. This room requires the player to pick up a pile of money to advance. Its description reads, "You took it from the mayor's office, didn't you?" The player leaves it behind before moving on, which is a curious action. We also see more famous art pieces sitting in the dumpster. This is an interesting detail to me as it seems to be saying that art quality is often unrelated to its monetary value. If the AI generated this zone, then I do wonder if it's being judgmental here. This next zone represents lust, and I must warn viewers that this is the most morbid thing in the video. The player encounters blood-covered infants shrieking, and a pair of scissors chases the player out of the area. If this is a representation of lust, it's probably showing a possible outcome of uncontrolled lust rather than the act itself, and like with the last area, the AI's intention in showing it is unknown. Next, we have a room with televisions and radios that slow down the player as they walk by, the sloth room. For a split second, you can see a smiling face as the player passes through, definitely implying that the player is being watched. In fact, there are a few hidden smiling faces throughout the video. They could be the smiling one, even. The next room is playing a recording of Oppenheimer describing the detonation of the atomic bomb, perhaps the ultimate incarnation of wrath. The final room has several statues staring into mirrors, the Pride Room. Beyond this area, the player passes through a gate and finds themselves arriving at a church. Before we see more of the church, however, the tape cuts to another anomaly. Patient 02 unable to move. It's actually curious that the tape cuts to here and then back to the church later. It makes me think the tape isn't showing events in the order they occur, but I could be wrong. The player enters a shop and is offered a task by the NPCs there, and, are you kidding me? Another horror project with a character named Rosa? Joking aside, the player rejects the task, though the game seems to act like they accepted the task anyways. We see Matthias sitting here and he cries out for help. We can get a good look at Matthias' avatar, so let's check him out. His outfit is similar to the test players, including the striped shirt and backpack. This appears to be the standard for player avatars. His text has a green text box. Green may indicate text from other players, in keeping with the color-coded text box we've seen thus far. His text also seems to autocomplete as though he were typing it in, with the game correcting his punctuation for him. Matthias asks where Chloe is, and the test player seems to be typing in a message to him through the TH-Brain keyboard. Matthias can't move and asks for a Mr. Kunimochi, but the test player states that that person no longer works with them. Matthias definitely seems trapped in the game somehow and wants out, but the game seems to lock up before any more talk can be had. We cut back to the church for the next anomaly. Random appearance of data. The player enters to find a priest apparently reciting a poem about the Virgin Mary, the lovely lady dressed in blue. This poem was a favorite of Bishop Fulton Sheen. The player speaks directly to the priest, who then tells a really bad joke about teaching his watch the secrets of Joseph of Cupertino, who apparently had the ability to levitate. In other words, now time flies! This is set in blue text boxes, which means it's not the AI doing this. Someone actually wrote this lame joke. Cut to the next anomaly. Object generation and change. Using a debug camera, the player looks at the gold Foxo statue and observes its behavior. When Foxo looks away, the statue is on all fours, but when he turns to look at it, it stands on 2 legs again. This hints at Foxo being much more feral and animalistic under the surface, and it's something we should keep in mind. Cut to the next anomaly, object generation. The player starts up a minigame where they must fly a plane and deliver items. Mid-flight, they encounter a statue resembling Lady Liberty, but it sure is strange looking. Cut to another spontaneous level generation. The player observes several NPCs slipping into a gap between buildings, and squeezes through to join them. The player appears in a checkerboard field with several odd statues and a gate resembling a pair of rulers, which resembles the icon of the Freemasons. Written on the gate is the national motto of France, first appearing during the French Revolution. Entering the gate, the player appears in a completely different area, a desolate wasteland. If you pay close attention, you can see someone in the distance dragging something away, but our attention is then drawn to a gathering of 6 wolves around a fallen lamb. The player examines it, but doesn't have much time to think about it before something suddenly attacks the player and triggers a sort of game over screen with the message, "Turn on the console on March 22nd, 1997. This is a curious message. The date doesn't seem of particular interest, though we can be certain the investigators will turn the game on at that time in-universe. Notice that the message appears in every possible language the player could have chosen, including a 5th language. I believe this is Enochian, an occult language supposedly taught by angels. According to the author, however, this doesn't actually translate to anything, but the fact that such a language is there may be of interest to us. The last anomaly for the video simply reads, "Read full report." The bush outside the church shifts to direct the player to a clearing with a tree and several fruit on the ground. The text, which has a red box in the gear again, pushes the player to take a fruit, but this turns out to be a really bad idea. More text flashes very quickly. The name now changed from Test 05 to The Accuser. The text feels very much like someone condemning the player and pushing them to take even more fruit. You can also see a sort of life meter with only one section of health left, and as the screen cuts to black, there's a brief moment where a really freaky face is visible. It's not difficult to connect this scene to the story of the Garden of Eden, wherein Eve was tempted to sin by eating the fruit from the Tree of Knowledge, which you'll remember was mentioned earlier in the video. The Accuser is a possible translation of a certain someone's name, that someone being known for pushing humans to plunge deeper and deeper into sin, and after the player is kicked out of the garden, we see a geometric figure with 6 wings now guarding the gate. It's covered in eyes, as the biblically accurate angels tended to be. That's such a lame phrase, but what can you do? Though, don't ask why the Millennium Eye is there. The noise it makes is actually Morse code. It translates to a prayer. This creature has actually been named. It is Uriel, one of the 4 archangels, said to be the one that guarded Eden. He also had a flaming sword, which Uriel promptly demonstrates on the player. The ground suddenly becomes red, and the player wakes up in a very reddish area with a beam of light in the distance. The player's money is also now negative 99,844. The player has gained 155 coins, so this may be a significant number, I'm really not sure. The player sees a fountain with a bull statue on top, and as the player advances it becomes clear that this red area is actually a reskinned version of the town from before. The bull statue is where the Foxo statue was. In the Book of Exodus, the Wanderers briefly worshipped a golden bull, which has since been associated with the ritualistic sacrifice of children, all of which is not a good sign here. The player notices Ito is there, though he doesn't look so good. In fact, his face resembles the creepy face that flashed after the Eden scene. With a red text box, Ito states he wishes he could go back, then states the smiling one wants 10 faces for a carnibale, the word intentionally spelled so as to include the name of an idol associated with child sacrifice. Again, then we get a warning about auto-generated tasks being potentially game-breaking. Guess that Radiant quest system wasn't such a good idea after all, huh, Bethesda? Joking aside, this means the task was generated by the AI, and that's a freaky task to generate for this game. The player accepts it. In the next area, we see that amidst all the red areas, Matthias' house remains entirely unchanged, and the robot, Isaac, is cowering behind a tree. The player enters the house and examines the drawer to find a collection of drawings by Paravicini, a man who supposedly predicted the future through his drawings. In fact, one of the drawings resembles the Lady Liberty-esque statue we saw earlier during the minigame. In the next room, there are several religious paintings, a cross, and a weird-looking bird character on the chest. Keep that one in mind for later. Keeping with the obvious religious theme so far, it's clear that the reason Matthias' house wasn't changed is because his faith is strong and he's protected as a result. Isaac was also not affected in reference to the story of Isaac in the book of Genesis, and also because he's a robot, something that isn't capable of sin the way humans are. Matthias also has a portrait of Christ hanging over his bed. This is a famous work known as the Divine Mercy, and upon examining it, the portrait suddenly animates. Suddenly, green text appears with a name reading, "The Man in Front of You." Is this another player? Whoever it is, they give the player the painting and say to find me where my body lies. And that's the end of the video. So, the big question, what do we make of all this? What's happening with the game and the AI? To be honest, we can only speculate. There's not enough to definitely say what's going on. We have a clear religious theme, and that seems to be the result of the AI generating content to fit this theme, and that AI is either highly malevolent or simply highly judgmental. Previous players became trapped in the game somehow, with only one of them looking to be any sort of position to give us more info, and we have hints towards the theme of child sacrifice, which is not a good sign at all. One thing's for sure though, the video left players with a lot of questions and a desire to get as many of them answered as they can. The second part of the tape is on Alluvium's channel, so if you haven't seen it yet, I hope my video left you more equipped to check it out yourself. I need to cut it here before this turns into an hour-long odyssey, but you can definitely look forward to me creating a follow-up video covering the second part of this story because, oh boy, is that going to be an adventure unto itself. See you guys for part 2.